Welcome back to Full Disclosure and the last of our four-part series on environmental politics. Jesse Marquez is frustrated by the fossilized staff of the various state departments who stubbornly resist any change whatsoever.
They are so ingrained with the old technologies and with the lobbyists from all the other polluting industries, they drag their feet, stomp their feet, and do everything to impede the adoption of these technologies. And there it becomes important for a lot of us environmental groups to understand what are the problems and complexities of what they're incurring and then bring them to light. And that's what we've done yesterday. For the first time, we have a UCPA regional office that's opened its door saying, okay, Mr. Marquez, I would like to meet some of these technology companies myself, since I'm the administrator for Region 9, which is the whole West Coast. Yes, my staff normally does it, but I want to get a hands-on approach too.
Wasn't the purpose of the Global Solutions Act to force everybody, whether private business or government agencies, to adopt all of this new technology?
AB 32 does require them to use the best available technologies. And for the California Air Resources Board to identify where these technologies can be used, where programs can be used, where incentives to be used. And that's part of our responsibility as our advisory committee to take a look at that. Well, we ran into a problem. The next part of after the early action measures was developing a scoping plan for the implementation of AB 32. Again, lobbyists came into the picture in Sacramento to dilute how that scoping plan was going to be implemented. So as a result, they adopted a plan that, in our opinion, does not comply with the law. An example, again, being the early action measures. The law says you will adopt every early action measure that has been identified. Well, we identified 37. There's probably 50 plus out there that they could have, and they only adopted 17. So they didn't do everything they were supposed to do. It also stated that all industries will be required to do greenhouse gas reductions. So you see requirements for various industries, but then, what happened to the oil refinery petroleum industries? There was nothing in there to mandate that they do something to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions.
According to Mr. Marquez, these big oil companies are the biggest, baddest abusers of all the polluters in California.
You already heard me mention about how we've seen significant increases in their criteria of pollutants. And so going back a few years ago, we got together with the South Coast Air Quality Management District to see, well, what rules and regulations do you have for these flaring events? A flaring is when you see fire and smoke coming out of these smokestacks at the refineries. Now, sometimes they're small, no big deal. But then on some days, they're major. It almost looks like a volcano is erupting out of these things. So what happened is that we were able to cause a rewrite of Rule 1118, which would require a mandatory flare reduction plan. Well, here it is, almost 5 years later. The industry itself has done everything to delay that. They've gotten like 4 waivers, maybe 5 waivers, to extend the deadline to submit their flare reduction plan. Every one was supposed to be turned in already this year. Not one of them met the due deadline after it had already been waived several times already. We actually started looking at the data from flaring for 3 years. Flaring has been increasing every single year. And we have these color photos we've been taking that shows that, we've caught them at sunrise, and it looks like a volcano erupting with all this black smoke coming out of it. We've seen them during the middle of the day. We've seen them at midnight when they're sneaking at the night trying to do it when the public can't report it. And we've collected numerous and hundreds of photos now of every refinery violating these rules on a regular basis.
According to the refining industry, flaring is used to eliminate waste gas, which isn't commercially viable. Flaring also acts as a safety systems for non-waste gas, which is released when needed to ease the strain on equipment. In other words, they protect gas processing equipment from being overpressured.
Now, flaring, if you talk to refinery, petroleum industry, they're saying yes, but it's a protective measure. Because what happens, we must have had some type of mechanical breakdown, or it could even be just maintenance, where we have to flare and we have to pass these gases, so we don't want an explosion. So they convince us that that's a good thing and it's necessary. Well, here's what we found out. It's not necessary. What you can do is you can build what's called a vapor recovery system. So when there is a malfunction and breakdown, the gases would be diverted from wherever the problem is, down a pipeline to an extra or a couple of extras big storage tanks. They just don't want to build them. They just don't want to do that. And then flaring is supposed to only occur during maintenance and when they have a mechanical breakdown. Well, wait a minute, you guys are having them like every week.
So the issue isn't the flaring itself, but rather the pollution released during the flaring.
And then they're supposed to report all their chemicals that they release into the air, both criteria as well as what they call the toxic ones. An example of that would be benzene. Most people have never even heard the word of benzene, but if you heard of leukemia, if you heard of lymphoma, myeloma, or anemia, benzene is one of the chemicals that's been identified that can cause leukemia. Well, you would think that our AQMD would be regulating it to get rid of it. Well, it wasn't until we started doing our Title V permit trend study that we found out that benzene has been increasing every year at every refinery. And yet the public is not notified of that. In fact, a family, unfortunately, could have a family member come down with leukemia and have no clue whatsoever what caused it.
Mr. Marquez also blames the government health agencies for not supporting his efforts to reduce the pollution coming from these refineries.
And the sad part, we have the medical industry sort of covering up the source too, because they don't ask the parents, well, by the way, where do you live? And if you happen to live by a refinery, that's probably the cause. That's not done. We did a public health survey near BP Arco Refinery, which is both borders of Carson and Wilmington, where we interviewed over 600 people. We have all the health data. I can tell you who has leukemia. I can tell you whose families had family members that died of leukemia. We wanted to be so thorough, the best that we could, that we identified, and we're going to use leukemia as our little example, where we identified 21 of the most common symptoms of leukemia. We have been going back to families and telling them, out of 21, you have 18 of the symptoms, and you haven't been identified with leukemia. We recommend that you immediately go to your doctor. And here's a copy of our little survey, because you should be checked and you should be tracked right now. Well, what else should we do? Immediately move away from here. Living here will cause you to die prematurely. You will only get worse living here. So even if you should get leukemia, even if you should go through your chemotherapy and you're in remission, you will steadily get worse living here.
This has become a very personal issue with Mr. Marquez.
I just got back from Sacramento, as you heard me mention. The secretary-treasurer of our group, Cecilia Mora, her husband Eddie, has been in subacute hospital for the last 13 years dying of lung cancer. He passed away yesterday afternoon.
Oh.
So, I mean, it's not just
Real.
me talking. This is real life
Yeah.
with real people. 6 months ago, a mother from San Pedro calls me up. All of her family has asthma, bronchitis, and various diseases and health problems. They have been rejected by every health insurer and want to know would the Wilmington Free Clinic be able to help them. But see, that's again an example of these health risk assessments that they do. It only projects how many people might die of cancer or a non-cancer. They do not tell you what is the health status today, which is why we've been pushing for what is called a health impact assessment. A health impact assessment, an HIA, is a comprehensive assessment of that project's impact on your health. Because what it does is create a baseline. It will tell you how many people have asthma, how many people have sinusitis, how many people have lung cancer, whereas right now they don't know. And since they don't know, how can they say this mitigation measure is going to address that issue? And they've done some. Port of LA has the Clean Air Action Plan. It has the Clean Truck Program. But what is it doing for me right now and tomorrow? It's doing nothing. If you're sick right now and if you're dying right now, it does nothing.
So what is he going to do to motivate the Port of LA and the various refineries to clean up their act? Jesse Marquez is an activist, and that's what he does best. You need to see what he's doing in supporting AB 32, the Global Solutions Act, coming up right after this short break. We'll be right back.